I've been stuck with hosting these Tipsy Talk series ever since I had the harebrained idea to bring them to the Northeast Kingdom. And as I tell everybody else, I did not come up with this idea. I stole it and adapted it. And mostly just because there's so many people in this area that have such interesting lives that don't get shared enough, and that we are only so many humans in a large area. So you kind of have to like corral everybody in the same tight room and stuff them with pizza and beer and say, shut up and listen, there's interesting things to be told. So, that's kind of the gist. We get people together, we try to support our local watering holes. Thank you to Parker Pie and Micah for hosting us. This is the second year that they've put up with me, and it's amazing because I think at the end of the night, they're like, we sold some pies and beer, I guess we have to do this again. So it's really great. But what I enjoy the most is just seeing people come out of the woodwork. So yeah, we just like to get people out. We like to bring them downtown, bring them out to Parker Pie. We're going to be doing this in downtown Newport at Parker Pie, and another series over at Jay in March. We go till the end of March. Every other Tuesday, except in March, there are going to be 3 Tuesdays because we have to cram them all in, and there were too many people signing up for these stories. We had to give them a chance.
Okay. I am going to start. Okay?
Yay.
If you ever plan to motor west, travel my way, take the highway, that's the best. Get your kicks on Route 66. So thank you for the help. It was May of 2008, and I was at the Derby Line Irving station. I got gas, and I was headed in to get something in the store, and I crossed paths with another local legend. I would see an even bigger one than myself, John Young, a piano tuner, piano restorer, and very, very talented woodworker. Okay? So he was coming out, I was going in. And he had on this big flowery shirt and this big hat with a rim, and he had shorts. And I said, boy, you're looking very summery, John. And he said, yeah, my wife Heidi and I were just starting out today on a road trip across the country. And so I wished him well, and I went in the store, he went out to his car, and then as I was walking back out to my car, I thought, well, you know, I want to go on a road trip like that. I want to drive across the country. So after my musical theater commitments that I have in the summer, I did. In August of that year, 2008, I drove across the country. And the interesting thing about it, as I have been thinking about this, because I've told this story a couple times before, it's been a while, but everything that happened that's connected to this story happened on the return trip. And I have no clear recollection of the trip out. I mean, I might have stopped in Colorado. My cousin lived in Colorado at the time. I may have stopped because I did often either coming or going, but I don't remember specifically. I remember going to Davis, California. I visited my friends Gerhardt and Heather. We studied translation and interpretation at the Monterey Institute of International Studies in the mid-'80s, and I hung out with them. And because, of course, as you know, West Coast is not around the corner from Vermont, I couldn't stay all that long. And I thought, well, okay, how am I going to go back? How am I going to go back? What do I want to do? So Davis is a little bit to the northeast of San Francisco. And I thought, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drive down to Monterey, because we all went to school there. Monterey is very pretty, you know. I'm going to get on Highway 1. I'm going to drive down the Pacific Coast Highway. And I had noticed on the atlas that there was this little county road that snaked its way up the hill. You know, there's these big mountains that look out over the Pacific Ocean. Incredibly beautiful place. And it was a county road, so I thought, okay, I'm going to go that far, and then I'm going to go on this county road, and I'm going to make my way inland, and I'm going to get on 101, and then I'm going to snake my way down to Barstow, California. And then I'm going to get on I-40 and I'm going to drive all the way to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and I'm going to visit my dear friend Ken, and then I'll turn left and go back to Vermont. Okay, so I left. I went to Monterey. I spent a couple of hours in Monterey, reminiscing, and then it was, I don't know, late in the afternoon. I got on Highway 1, and I headed south, and I went across that very famous bridge that everybody knows on the Pacific Coast Highway, and I went about, I don't know, probably 30 miles further south, and then there was this little road, and it just had a little sign. It was a county road, gravel, and it was a beautiful night. The sun was setting, and you know, it's one of the most beautiful places in the world, the Pacific Coast Highway, Big Sur. And so I took in the scene, and then I got on the road, and I started to snake my way up the hill, you know. And I kept going, and then you know, the higher I got, the more spectacular the view was. And I thought, well, this is a really good way to begin the trip. Okay, so I got up to the top, and the road then leveled off. There was kind of like a mesa up there. And I'm just driving along, and then all of a sudden, on the left-hand side of the road, is a very large tank. Now, a tank, an army tank. And this is not a tank that is like on a pedestal that's like a monument or a memorial to the Second World War, the First World. No. This was a functioning tank. And I looked at the road in front of me, and I could see tank treads going across the road. And I said, well, I won't say what I said. You know, I said, what, is this like some kind of army facility? I mean, is it some kind of a proving ground or a training ground or something? And I kept going, and then I could see this very bright light in the ahead of me, and it was a huge Quonset hut. And the road went right under the Quonset hut. And I thought, okay, all right, I'm just going to go. And there was a guard. And I said, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I mean, it said it was a county road. And, blah, blah, blah. And he said, calm down. It is a county road. This is the Hunter Liggett training ground. You know, you're not going to be killed. All right? You can continue. You just drive through the reserve, and then you continue to whatever road I was on to. And so I did. And I eventually got to 101, and I stayed in the motel somewhere. Got up the next morning, and I headed to Barstow, California. Okay. And I got to Barstow, and I-40 starts there, okay, goes across the country. And I was just about to get on I-40, and I saw a sign that said, Travel Historic Route 66. And I hadn't given Route 66 even one little iota of a thought. And I thought, oh, Route 66, Route 66, and the sign. It was like a siren song. You know, it was calling to me. You know, it was calling to me, and it went a little something like this. Voice went, I am calling you. Can't you hear me? I am calling you. Now, as much as I would like to say that I wrote that, I did not. It is the refrain of the theme song of a very famous late 1980s cult film that was filmed on location in Newberry Springs, California, on Route 66 in 1987. Now, I'm going to play it again. And I'm going to sing. And I fully expect somebody's hand to go up to tell me what the movie is. I am calling you. I'm not seeing any hands that are ready to go up. I am calling you. Okay, here's a hint. All right, here's a hint. No. German film. German production company. Filmed on Route 66. And the name of the German film was an English name. And that name was Out of Rosenheim. And that was the German title of the German film, the German original version of the film. Now, when it was marketed in the United States, the film's in English, okay? When it was marketed in the United States, it had a different name. And that's the name that I was expecting that somebody would be able to tell me what it is. No? Oh my gosh.
Uncultured.
Oh. I expected more from you.
More hints.
All right. So it was Baghdad Cafe.
I was.
See,
I
you
was
should
gonna
have
say
put,
that.
you
I was
should
gonna-
have put your hand up.
Not because of knowing the film.
Yeah, no. All right, everybody in this
Oh,
room, and you can find it on Amazon Prime, okay, you should watch
that
Baghdad
film.
Cafe. Okay, now that was a bit of a digression,
Yeah.
okay? But it's true, it was calling to me, and so I got on Route 66 in Barstow. Now, Route 66 follows I-40 for about 50 miles. They're right next to each other, okay? Until you get to the town of Ludlow, California. Now, Ludlow, California is not like Ludlow, Vermont. Ludlow, California is a truck stop. A truck stop with a Dairy Queen and a motel, okay? So I stopped there because I needed to get gas. It was Labor Day weekend, and it was hot. It was hot, you know? And I remember when I was getting gas, people always used to say, oh, well, you know, the heat out in the West, it's dry. It's a dry heat. And I was thinking, I don't friggin' care. It is hot. It is very hot. I got my gas, and I went in, well, afterwards I went into the Dairy Queen and I got a blizzard, you know, because it was hot and I wanted something cold. So I got my blizzard and I got back in the car and I proceeded east on Route 66. Now, after this is over tonight, you can go and look at your atlas and you can see that moment where Ludlow, California, where it is on the map, Route 66 dives to the south and goes about probably 15, 20 miles south of I-40, and then it comes back up, okay? So that's where I was. Now, Route 66, if you love abandoned properties, diners, motels, gas stations, banks, you know, I mean, I-40 just devastated so many communities in that area once it went through. But anyway, I love that kind of stuff. You know, I was just in my element. But then the further on I went, no buildings, no nothing. And the road just went to the horizon, no traffic, just me, okay? And then in the distance, I could see a person walking on the side of the road. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd, because there was no car between me and that person. There was no motorcycle, there was nothing broken down. There was just this person walking on the side of the road. And so I approached, and he didn't have a backpack. He didn't have any kind of a bag. He had a hat, like a baseball cap, and he had a little bottle of water, and he was just walking. And I thought, okay, this is not right. This person should not, because I already mentioned it was hot, right? Okay. So I stopped and I pulled over, and he came up to the side of the car, and he was sort of a little bit in distress. I mean, it was clear that something was wrong. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Well, no, I'm not really." And I said, "Well, get in the car." And he got in the car, and I had my air conditioning on, and I had drinks in a cooler, and I gave him something to drink. And I said to him, I said, "Well, did your car break down somewhere?" And he looked at me and he said, "No, it's much stranger than that." And then he proceeded to tell me a story that anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. He was a young Norwegian freelance photographer with a huge passion for the Southwest of the United States. He loved the Southwest of the United States, and he had a dream. And his dream was to go to Los Angeles to buy a Mustang convertible, to drive Route 66 in his Mustang convertible, and to spend the first night on the road on Route 66 under the stars in the Mojave Desert. And that is exactly what he did. He bought a powder blue Mustang convertible, and he drove it up to Route 66, and he went, I don't know, probably 15, 20 miles down beyond Ludlow, found a little road that went off to the south of Route 66 that was just tracks in the sand, went out there and parked his car, took out an inflatable camping mattress, inflated it, and slept under the stars on his inflatable mattress. Now, that in itself is not that unusual. I mean, you know, you look in the stars and its beautifulness. But he told me that on his way to Route 66, he'd stopped at a rest area. He'd gotten up and he sat on a bench. He'd went to the bathroom, and he sat on a bench and he stretched his arms out like this. And he's describing this, okay, in the car. And he felt a sudden pinch of pain on his one of his left fingers, or right fingers. It was a scorpion. Oh. He'd been stung by a scorpion, okay? And this, ladies and gentlemen, is what is known as a harbinger. Yes. A harbinger, okay? So anyway, he was stung. He had a bit of a reaction. He told me, and again, it'll come back in a bit, that he has reactions to, stings. And anyway, so even though he had just had that experience, he decided that he was going to spend the night under the stars, no tent, no camper. And I was thinking to myself, if it had been me, I don't think if I'd just been stung by a scorpion that I'd inflate a mattress and sleep on it under the stars in the Mojave Desert. But he did. What happened in the morning was something that when he told it to me, I said, no. There was a leak in the air conditioning system that was pooling, antifreeze on the floor on the passenger side of the car. And there was a little pool of it, okay? When he woke up in the morning and he walked over to his powder blue Mustang convertible, there was an entire hive of bees that had landed on the right side of the car, covered the whole front of the car, the windshield, both sides, the dashboard, the seat, the inside of the door, the outside of the door, the floor. Just a seething mass of bees. And he was deathly afraid because he's allergic to bee stings. So he couldn't get near his car, and he's all alone in the Mojave Desert. And so he decides, and I swear to God, I might use a little bit of hyperbole every now and then, but I'm not using very much, okay? He said to me, well, I thought that the only thing I could do was just walk back to Ludlow and see if I could find an exterminator. And I'm thinking, an exterminator in Ludlow, California, it's a truck stop, But that's what he did. He walked back, and it was at least 10 miles to go back to Ludlow. And I said, you walked back to Ludlow? And he said, yeah, and I tried to find an exterminator, but I couldn't find one. So I figured I'd just walk back to the car and hope that the bees were just gone. And so that's where I found him. He was walking back, and he'd gotten a little, he had changes because he couldn't get his wallet was in the car. He had change in his pocket. And he just bought a little bottle of water and was just, walking back to his car. And he was beginning to suffer, I think, the beginnings of heat stroke. Yeah. And I had to stop him at this point. I said, wait a minute. I said, you're telling me that a little bit further down the road, there's a road that goes off, and out in the desert is a powder blue Mustang convertible covered in bees. And he said, yes. And I said, let's go to your car. And so we drove a few miles, and as I was driving, I was thinking, he could be a psychopathic killer. There's a good chance that he could be a psychopathic killer. But then I thought, he's sitting right next to me, and he could think that I'm a psychopath. So somehow those dueling possibilities sort of canceled each other out, and I was strangely relieved by that. And so I drove, and the road came, and we got off the road, and it was just 2 tracks in the sand. It went down into a riverbed. It came up, and then it proceeded to the south of Route 66 to an even more remote area. By the way, it was an area that's referred to as the Devil's Playground. There are all of these, I'm sure it must be volcanic in somewhere. There are all these like miniature little volcanic mountains just all over the place. And it's all this very black rock, like pumice, I guess, maybe. And they're just everywhere. So we were just kind of, meandering between them. And then there is the car, the powder blue Mustang convertible. And as we got close to it, the bees started buzzing around my car. And I thought, okay. So we backed up. And then I got out. He didn't get out. He wouldn't get out of the car. He was afraid. And I got out, and I walked around towards to the car from the side. And it was something out of a 1950 science fiction movie. The car was undulating with bees. You couldn't see the car. You could just see the bees. But only on the right side of the car, because that is where this fluid was. And he surmised that was why they were drawn to the car. And I said, well, we need to create a lure. We need to create something sweet that we can just put on the ground and lure the bees away from your car. So I had candy, chocolate bars, whatever, and soda, and I just made this random mixture. And of course it was hot, I've already mentioned that. We were in the desert, and it all got, mixed together. I spread it out on the top of a garbage bag, thinking, this is a brilliant solution, Not a single bee came over to my trap. And I walked all the way around to the driver's side of the car, and there were no bees. It was like there was an invisible barrier between the left side of the car and the right side of the car. And I looked, and then I had this idea. And I said, I have an idea. I am going to give you the keys to my car. You are going to give me the keys to your car. I am going to sit in the driver's seat of your powder blue Mustang convertible. And if I get stung by a bee, if they attack me, I will certainly get out of your car, and we'll figure out a plan B. But I believe, because of course I'm a bee expert now at this point, I'm a bee expert, I believe that they're not going to pay any attention to me because they're focused on this stuff that's on the right side of the car. And if I'm right, I am going to slowly drive your Mustang through the desert on this little back road to Route 66, and I'm going to turn left, and I'm going to drive your car as fast as I possibly can, and I'm going to blow all the friggin' bees out of your car. And he said, okay. So I gave him the key to my car. I had a little Honda Fit. It was almost a matching blue color. It was not quite the same blue as his, but close. And I went over to the car, and I opened the door, and I sat down in the car next to the bees. I was somewhat anxious, as you might imagine, and I felt the need to address the bees. So I turned to them, and I don't know if there were male bees or female bees or worker bees. I don't know what the gender was. But I turned to them and I said, girls, we are going to go for a little ride. I want you to stay over there, and I am going to stay here. And when I get to Route 66, it would be very nice if you all just flew away, okay? So I turned the car on. And I swear to you, I am not making this up, okay? I am not making this up. I turned the car on, and I started, and the bees stayed absolutely over there, undulating. And there was bzzz, there was just a constant buzzing. And it took me, I don't know, about 15 minutes to get back to Route 66. And I have to tell you, that this was a tricked out Mustang. It looked like the bridge of the Starship Enterprise. He had like a CB radio and I think some early GPS thing. This was 2008 after all. And I got out to Route 66 and I said, okay, it's your idea. You're going to do this. You're going to do this. And I just launched to the west. And I got the car up to just under 100 miles an hour. That was it. I just couldn't. I'm sure the car could go faster, but I just, I just couldn't go any faster than that. But when I got to Ludlow, California, and I pulled into that truck stop, those bees were gone. All of them. Okay. And I jumped out of the car. And the first thing I thought was, okay, I've got to figure out how to put this the roof up, the hood up of this convertible. And I put it up manually somehow, and I rolled up the windows, okay? And I was feeling very heroic, frankly, you know. And then I went out to the edge of the truck stop and by Route 66, and I waited for him to come in my car. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited, and no little blue Honda Fit. And I thought, wait a minute, is this some kind of weird ruse? I mean, he wanted to get rid of this car? Is it some sort of a hiker? Did he steal the car? Did he murder the person who owned the car? Because why on earth would he want to trade a powder blue Mustang convertible for a Honda Fit? You know, and all of this is going through my mind, and then I see my Honda Fit slowly advance towards Ludlow, and he came and he didn't pull up real close, but he stayed in the car and asked me. He said, "Did it work?" And I said, "Yeah, it did work." And he said, "You are my savior. You have saved my life." It's very dramatic. And then he talked about the group Alabama. Oh, yeah. Oh, he loves Alabama? Okay. Well, there's a song. Oh my God, I'm not going to remember the name of the song. It's like a song like "You're My Angel" or my Guardian Angel" or something. There's a song by Alabama. And he said it was his favorite song. And he said, "Now, whenever I hear this song, I'm going to think of you." And I said, "Well, that's very nice." And blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so I said, he finally did get out of the car, and we're standing there. And I said, we've had this rather odd experience. And we haven't even introduced ourselves to each other. And I said, my name is Mark Violette. I live in Vermont. And he said, well, it's very nice to meet you. Now keep in mind, Norway. Freelance photographer, Norway, okay? He said, well, very nice to meet you, Mark. My name is Bob. And I said, Bob? I said, you're Norwegian and your first name is Bob. And he said, yes, my first name is Bob. He said, when I turned 18, I changed my name legally to Bob Lynx. Bob Lynx. And I said, Bob, like Bobalinks? He said, yeah, I liked how those two names sounded together, and I changed my name. And I said, so it's not Robert? He said, no, it's Bob. Bob Lynx. And he took out his Norwegian passport and he showed me, and it said Bob Lynx, Skudvik, Norway. And I said, well, very nice to meet you, Bob. Very nice to meet you. And we chatted, and it started to begin to get a little darker. It was dusk, and it was clear to me that he was afraid to get back in the car because of the bees. And I said, I really, really, really do not think that there are any more bees in the car. I think it's going to be okay. So he very cautiously went over to the car, and he got in the car, and he rolled up all the windows, and he was smiling. Oh, I should tell you too that we exchanged information, and we're still in contact to this day. We're friends. I've been to Norway to meet him and his wife. This video is being made for him, essentially. Because Now here's the thing about that, okay? He changed his name back to his original Norwegian name, and why, you might ask? It's because there was a certain president between 2016 and 2020 that Bob was not such a big fan of. And so he changed his name back to Jørn Øksnes, which was his birth name. And so his name now is Jørn. But then, when he was in the car, it was Bob. And I said, well, I hope that we keep in touch. And he thanked me, and he said, you saved my life, your guardian angel. And then he turned, and he got on Route 66, and he headed back to Los Angeles. And as he was driving off into the sunset, I mean literally into the sunset, I thought to myself, Mark, you got your kicks on Route 66. Thank you. Now, are any of you familiar with Lemony Snicket, a series of unfortunate events?
Yeah.
Okay. Because this is only what I just told you, that's the story. Okay? That's the story. But after he left, he met up with his wife. He was traveling with his wife. They went to San Francisco. On their way to San Francisco, and I don't know the details of this, okay? On his way to San Francisco, he got bitten by a snake. A snake. Now, I would, under any other circumstances with any other person, I would say, well, no, I don't believe this. But I was there, and I saw the car with the bees and the whole thing. So I said, so scorpion, bees, but I saved you from the bees, and then you got bitten by a snake. Yeah, so then he was sick in San Francisco, and he wanted to go back to, they were on their way back to Los Angeles in the Mustang. He was on some kind of medication. He fell asleep at the wheel. He hit a telephone pole. The telephone pole impaled the Mustang.
Oh, no.
So I heard all about this later, and anyway, there's more, but at what ended up, the final thing in this bizarre story is that he contracted Nile virus when he was in Los Angeles, and he had some sort of grand mal seizure related to it, and he had to be, medevaced back to Norway. I mean, it wasn't like a private jet that flew him back to Norway, but he was on some sort of medical status back to Norway, and that's the story of Bob Link's alias Jørn Øksnes. Yes.
Has his fascination with the Southwest worn
Well,
I bet.
No. I will tell you that, and I didn't meet his wife at the time, okay? She was off doing something else when this all happened with the bees. But what they had done before this all happened is they had gone to different locations in the Southwest and geocached, I'm not making this up, okay? Geocached bottles of Jack Daniel's whiskey. Okay, so in 2013, my friend Tracy and I, who, by the way, I will say that I'm going to pick her up on Valentine's Day in Chicago, we're in Ohio. She lives in Ohio. We're going to spend the night at the Palmer House. Thanks to Candlin in the back there for recommending the Palmer House, fancy railroad hotel. And we're going to have because whenever we travel, everybody thinks we're a couple. We're not a couple. And I always feel compelled to tell everybody, oh, no, we just met in college, and we like to travel together, and nobody gives a damn. So we're a couple. So I said, Tracy, before we do our drive, we are driving the complete length of Route 66, starting on February 16th. Anyway, so I'm looking forward. But sadly, in case any of you are planning to do a similar thing, the place where the bee stuff happened in that area that's to the north, to the south of I-40, because of a flood that occurred there in the early 2010s. That whole section of Route 66 is closed. They have to rebuild, San Bernardino County has to rebuild the bridges before 2026, which is the 100th anniversary of Route 66. So anyway, Tracy and I, we went on Route 66 in 2013. Bob, who was still going by Bob at the time, sent me pictures and geo-coordinates of this little miniature volcanic mountain, on top of which was geocached a bottle of Jack Daniels. And we went to this mountain, and we went all over the place, and there was a little cairn on the top of it. But Bob had not said anything about a cairn, okay? Well, the damn bottle was under the cairn. And because he didn't say it, I thought, well, you know, somebody put this cairn here. You know, yeah, I'm not gonna, well, it wasn't so much a cairn as one of those, you know, those like Nepalese figures that people make with stone. I don't know what they're called. Anyway, I didn't want to mess with it, okay? And we had fabulous cell signal, and I called them in Norway. And they were both sick with the flu, so neither of them answered. So we didn't dig up the underneath, and that's where it was. And so anyway, we couldn't find it. We went to my friends who live in Davis later, and we had because we all went to school together in Monterey, and we had this nice weekend. We're going to do a recreation of that when we get out there at the end of February. And so I told them this whole story. And Christy, one of our classmates, she got a little idea. Okay, about our story. She didn't say anything to anybody, though. So, come Sunday, we had to leave to begin our journey back to the east. And we go out to the car, and there's a string hanging out of the window of the car. And I look at the string, and it goes down onto the driveway, and it goes across the driveway, and then it goes around the garage, around to the, you know, around to the back of the house. And everybody's saying, well, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. So we follow the string all the way around. And way over on the other side of the house, there was a big bin of compost. And I pull the string, and out of the compost came a bottle of Jack Daniels. And I still have that bottle of Jack Daniels sitting on my counter in Holland, and I will keep it forever. Anyway, enough. That's it. That's all I got.